Good morning and welcome to Wednesday's Maths. So this week so far we have rewound to pie charts. Then we started looking at fractions of pie charts and what they show. Well, today we're going to take one step further and we're going to use everything we've learned so far, and we're going to start looking at percentages and pie charts. We already know how percentages and fractions work together, and it's the same thing, but now it's in a pie chart. So this is rewinding to loads of learning that you've learned before, and it's using it in a slightly different way. First up, it's rewind time. So, as a fraction, you would say that this represents one whole. Okay, this is the whole thing. It's a whole number. What would it be as a percentage then? If you had the whole thing, you would say you've got 100%. If this was a pizza and you had the whole thing, you'd have 100% of your pizza. Right, let's say this time then, it looks like this. What have you got as a fraction? Well, as a fraction, you've got half. What would that be as a percentage? What's a half as a percentage? Well, if the whole is 100%, half is 50%, because half of 100 is 50. So 1/2 is the same as 50%. Okay, what about this one then? What is it as a fraction? It's a quarter. What is a quarter as a percentage? 25%. Because 100 divided by 4 is 25. So this is 25%. That would be 50%, because it's the same as a half or 2/4. That would be 75%, because it's 25, 50, 75. So 3/4 is the same as 75%. And that would then be 100% or 1/2 or 4/4. All of these things are equivalent. Okay, have a go at working out what are these fractions as percentages. So 1/2 is the same as 50%. A quarter, 25%. If 1/4 is 25%, 3/4 is 75%. So, to work these out, you did half of 100, you did 100 divided by 2. To work out a quarter of 100, you divide by 4. So to work out a fifth, we do 100 divided by 5, which would be 20%. To work out a tenth of 100, we divide by 10%. And to work out a 20th, we divide by 20, 5%. Okay, remember these because you're going to need them. And remember that the whole thing equals 100%. Percent means out of 100, 100%. Okay then, it's discover time. So today we have got Aki, and he is sat in his lounge or his bedroom maybe, and he's reading a book. So this book is telling him all about the atmosphere of the Earth and the atmosphere of Mars. And you can see the two pie charts that represent that. So first question is this, 1A. What fraction of the atmosphere of Mars is nitrogen, argon, and carbon dioxide? What fraction of the atmosphere of Mars is nitrogen, argon, and carbon dioxide? So really, what that's asking you is, what fraction of the atmosphere is carbon dioxide? And if you can, so you're going to have to start off with, it's asking you for fractions and it's giving you percentages. So you need to work out what nitrogen is as a fraction, argon is as a fraction, and carbon dioxide is as a fraction. And then question B is, how accurate is Aki's estimate for the Earth's atmosphere? And he's saying in his little speech bubble, I estimate 1/5 of Earth's atmosphere is oxygen. Right, is he right or not by looking at the pie charts? So first things first, same as always, gather your facts. What do you know first of all? And what you do know is that the whole pie chart represents 100%. Pause the video, have a go. Okay then, it's answer time. So first things first, we know that nitrogen is 2% and argon is 2%. So first of all, I'm going to write those as fractions. Percent means out of 100. So N, which is nitrogen, is 2%, which means 2 out of 100. And actually, it's exactly the same for argon because that was also 2%. 2/100ths I can actually simplify to 1/50th. So nitrogen makes up 1/50th of Mars's atmosphere, and argon makes up 1/50th of argon's atmosphere as well. Right, if you know, I'll show it on the pie chart, you know the whole thing is worth 100%. If this is 2% and this is 2%, 100% take away 4% would be 96%. Let's put the percentage sign in there. So I know that in Mars's atmosphere, 96% of it is carbon dioxide. 96% is the same as writing 96 over 100, so I can simplify it. I can simplify it again to 24/25ths. It's not the easiest fractions to work with, but there we go. So that's your answer for A. Remember to simplify. Right, for B then. So Aki thinks that the oxygen is about 1/5. So remember, it's only an estimate. He's estimating it's about 1/5. So we know that other gases is 1%, and we know that nitrogen is 78%. So all together, we know that this is 79%. So then, the oxygen, I've put an O here, let's put like a 0. So the oxygen is 100%, take away the 79%. It's the whole thing. Take away these two parts, take away the 79%, and I'll be left with oxygen. So 100 take away 79 is 21. So oxygen is 21% of the Earth's atmosphere. So was Aki right? Is that nearly 1/5? Well, actually, I know from my number facts earlier, I know that 20% is the same as 1/5, and it's actually 21%. So it's 1% over. So Aki's estimate was pretty good, really. Right then, think together. So this pie chart shows what percentage of Earth's surface is covered by different features. So you can see on there you've got salt water, desert, mountain, snow/ice, and land that can be farmed. Right. This pie chart looks a little bit different to other ones we've seen. Why? Well, if you look at this one, it has got some segments drawn in, but it's also got around the edge almost like little interval markers, a little bit like we'd see on a clock. So before I start anything, I'm going to look at those segments that aren't marked in but are just kind of marked around the edge and see if that might help me work this out. Remembering that if we're working in percentages, the whole thing is 100%. Right, pause your video, have a go. Okay then, answer time. So I'm going to count these bits here. So I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 10 of these intervals around the outside. Well, if I know that the whole thing is 100% and there's 10 intervals, each one is 10%. So I know that that would be 10%. So this, I'm going to count the blue first of all. So it would be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. So I know that salt water takes up 70%. Right, if I look at the rest though, none of the rest take up one whole segment. This one takes up 1 and a bit segments. Okay, let's see how we can work the rest out then. Well, I can actually see that mountain, desert and snow and ice are actually all the same. Those segments are equal. If I look at just mountain and snow and ice, I can see that together they make up one segment, and each segment was 10%. So I know that this one is half of one segment and this one's half of one segment. So if they're both half and one segment is 10%, snow and ice must be 5%, and mountain must also be 5%. I know that desert was the same, so desert must also be 5%, and I can see that by looking at this pie chart. I can see that it's halfway between one of those segments. Right, 2 ways to work out land that can be farmed then. You can say, well, it's 1 segment and a half. So if it's 1.5 segments, it must be 15%. Or you know the whole thing has to add up to 100. So you could have done 70%, add 5, 75, add 5, 80, add 5, 85. So what have you got to add to get to 100? 15%. Well done if you got that right. Here is question 2. Andy produced this pie chart to show what he ate during the week. And at the bottom, there are 4 statements. So which statements, match the pie chart? So which ones are correct and which ones are incorrect? Remember, first things first, gather your facts. So you can see that vegetables is 10%, fruits 15%, pasta's 15%, cheese is 20%, and bread's 35%. Right, well, what would eggs be then? What percentage would eggs be? Remember, the whole thing is 100%. Some of these statements are also asking you for it as fractions, but we can do that. We can switch between fractions and percentages. Remember that percentages just means out of 100. Right, have a go. Okay then, answer time. So, first statement, more than 1/3 of his food was bread. Well, as I've written down on the top line, 1/3 is the same as 33.3333 recurring percent. 35% is more than 33.3333 recurring, so that is true. Okay, more than 1/3 of the food was bread. And actually you can see that by looking at the pie chart. You can see that it's just a little bit more than 1/3. So that one is true. Number 2, which is the second line I've written, out of every 250 grams, 50 grams was cheese. So 50 out of 250 I've written as a fraction. I've then simplified it to 5/25, and I've then simplified that again to 1/5. So was cheese 1/5 of the pie chart? Well, 1/5 is the same as 20/100ths, which is the same as 20%. And actually, I know that 1/5 is the same as 20%. I look at the pie chart, cheese was 20%. So that tells me that these are equal. 50 out of 250 grams is the same as 20%. So that is also true. Number 3. 1/3 of his food was fruit and vegetables. So 1/3, and I put equals F plus V because that's fruit plus veg. So fruit was 15%, veg was 10%, add those together and that's 25%. Is 25% equivalent to 1/3? Well, no, it's not. 25% is equivalent to a quarter. So that one was wrong. Last one then, he ate 3 times as much pasta as eggs. Ooh, we don't know how many eggs he ate. I don't know what percentage of eggs it was. Well, remember the whole thing is 100%. If you add all the rest up, the rest add up to 95%. So then that means eggs must be 5%. Pasta was 15%. Can you times eggs by 3 and get to pasta? 5 times 3 is 15. Yes, you can. So that one was also correct. Right, into our practice books then. So this is page 111. 111. Have a go. Okay then, well, number 1 was nice and easy. So you know that the whole pie chart represents 100%. So if you look at the first one, 40% add 35%, 75%. So what must be missing? Well, it must be 25%, which you can see because that is a quarter. Second one then, you can see that 14% add 20% add something makes up half. Half is the same as 50%. So 14% add 20% is 34%. What do you add to 34 to get to 50? 16%. See them? Again, you can see, so this time they've put 180 degrees. Now we know 180 degrees is the amount of degrees on a straight line, which tells me that that represents half. So that's 5/10 or 50%. I know that 1/5, if I turned it into tenths, would be 2/10, which tells me that the missing bit would be 3/10. Why was it helpful for me to turn it into tenths? Well, now it's really easy for me to turn it into hundredths, and that helps me turn it into percentages. So 3/10 is the same as 30 hundredths, which is the same as 30%. Well done if you got that right. Lovely. So answers for number 2. Again, look at what you know first of all. So I know that Bella had 25% of the vote, and I can see that because it's got that little right angle marked out. So Bella had 25% of the vote. The whole thing, the 100%, is 60%. Let's say that again. 100% was 60 people, sorry, okay? And you can see I've written this at the bottom. So 100% is 60 people. So if you know that Bella had a quarter of the vote, she had 25% of the vote, you can do 60 divided by 4, which would be 15. So 25% is 15 people, and I've written that next to Bella. Right, if I know what 100% is, I can work out the other percentages really easily. So to get from 100% to 20%, I divide by 5. 60 divided by 5 is 12. So I know that Isla, who was 20%, is 12 people. She had 12 votes. If I know 100%, I can work out 10% by dividing by 10. 60 divided by 10 is 6. If I know that, I can work out 5% by halving it. So 5% would be 3 votes. Zach was 35%. He had 35% of the vote. So I'm going to add up 20%, 10% and 5%. So 12 add 6 add 3, which would be 21 people. And then we're just left with Rena. Now, there's 2 ways you can work Rena out. You can either add the amount of people up, take it away from 60, or you can add the percentages up and take it away from 100. So 25 add 35 would be 60. Add 20 would be 80. So Rena must also be 20, which we already know is 12 votes. Super work if you got that right. Okay, questions 3 and 4. Have a go at these ones. Lovely. Let's go through the answers for number 3 then. So, gather your facts first of all. You know that second-hand shops are 25%, shopping centres 35%. So, I add these together, take it away from 100, and I know that shopping online must be 40%. Okay, I'm happy now. I've labelled my pie chart. Now I can have a look at the question properly. So, the question tells me that 56 people say they go to shopping centres. I'm going to add that onto my pie chart. So, 35% is 56 people. Right, how can that help me then to work out what the whole might be, or how many people use second-hand shops or online shops? Well, if that had told me 25% or 20%, that would have been really easy, because then I could have just multiplied it by 5 if it was 20%, or 4 if it was 25%, and then I'd have got to 100%. With 35%, I can't multiply it straight to 100. So I'm going to divide it by 7, as you can see on my working out on the left. I'm going to divide 35% by 7% to get 5%. 5% is the same as 8 people, because I do 56 divided by 7. Now I know 5%, now I can work out 100% by multiplying it by 20. So I then need to times 8 people by 20, which is 160 people. So I know that 100%, the entire pie chart represents 160 people. So I need to work out how many people go to second-hand shops. Well, I know that that's 25%, which is the same as a quarter. A quarter of 160 I divide by 4 is 40 people. I then need to work out 40% of 160 people. And there's lots of ways you could do this. Actually, looking at my working out, I already know what 35% is. It's 56. I already know what 5% is. It's 8. So if I add those together, I know that 40% is actually the same as 64 people. Now I look back at my question and it said how many more people shop online than use second-hand shops. So I'm going to do 64 people, take away 40 people, which would be 24 people. There's a lot of steps to that one. Well done if you got that right. Okay then, answers to number 4. So, in one football season, the Rovers scored 48 penalties and missed 32. The pie chart shows what United scored. Which team was more successful? Well, I'm looking at United first of all. United missed 40% of their penalties. Well, if the whole thing's 100%, they must have scored 60%. So they scored 60% of their penalties. Now I'm going to look at the Rovers. The Rovers scored 48 and they missed 32. Okay, how can I write that as a fraction? Well, I need to know what the whole is. So they had a go at 80 penalties because I added 48 and 32 together and they scored 48. So their fraction would be 48 out of 80 they scored. I'm going to simplify that by dividing it both by 8, which would be 6/10, and 6/10 is the same as 60%. So actually, they were exactly the same. They both scored 60% of their penalties. Okay then, last bit is the challenge if you want to have a go at it. If you don't, that's absolutely fine. Well done for today. If you do, pause the video and have a go. I think you'll be find this one quite easy today. It's not too tricky. Right then, answer time to the challenge. So, these pie charts show you the types of trees, and we can see there's Hettidy Woods, quite sure how you say that one, which has 80 trees, and Lanhay Forest, which has 200 trees. And the question's asking me how many more birch trees are there. So I need to work out the amount of birch trees in each woods. I can see that birch trees are a quarter of the trees in the wood. So a quarter, 25%. A quarter of 80 is 20. So there's 20 birch trees in Hettidy Wood, would we say? Let's look at Lanhay Forest then. So I can see that the birch trees, we'll go a bit slower. So willow trees I can see are definitely 25%, and I can see that because it's got the little right angle in the corner. A fifth is the same as 20%. So if I add those up, 20 add 30 is 50, add 25 is 75%, which tells me that the birch trees must be a quarter as well. And I can actually kind of see that. I can see that that is a quarter of that pie chart. So I need to work out a quarter of 200, which is 50. Now I need to work out how many more. Well, 50 take away 20 is 30. Super work if you got that right. Well done.